At my mother's birthday party, I was pouring tea. The phone rang. It was the daughter. She said, "Get out before it's too late." I got up and went to the door. On my mom's birthday, I arrived before everyone else. As usual. My name is Mary. I helped set the table, set the plates, cleared the occasional crumbs off the table as if I were not a guest but an attendant. I always had the same role in this house. Quiet, inconspicuous, but indispensable. I performed it automatically. No one even thought that without me the holiday would look different. My mother met me with the phrase, "You again without a gift? Well, at least help with the salad." I had an envelope in my hand, but she didn't even notice. I didn't answer. I put my bag down and went to the kitchen. My sister was already in there, bossing me around, running errands. When I put the groceries on the table, all she said was, "At least don't forget to salt it in time." I didn't say a word. There was a familiar feeling inside, like you're always at fault, even when you do everything right. Gradually the guests gathered. My brother and his wife arrived later than everyone else. As usual with pathos, with loud stories about their successes. Mother glowed as she listened to him. Every word he said was more important than anything I did. She would clap him on the shoulder, laugh and say, "That's my son. Always knows how to make everyone laugh." I sat next to him, quietly placing the bread in the basket. No one thanked me. Everything was taken for granted. At the table, conversations flowed noisily. Everyone was discussing work, shopping, the children's progress. When I tried to say a few words about Lisa, my daughter, my sister immediately interrupted. "It's not interesting. You always start with the little things." The laughter at the table was loud, but I could see that Lisa was looking at me seriously. She was 12 and she understood more than I would have liked. She squeezed my hand under the table. It was her mute sign of support. She saw that I was being pushed out. I got up to clear the extra plates from the table. My mother threw down. "You keep dragging and dragging. Sit down for once." But when I did sit down, she added, "Don't sit idle. The guests will think we're keeping you idle." Double standard again. Do anything, it's still wrong. I chuckled to myself. Sarcasm was my only weapon. Inside I thought, yes, Mom, I was made to carry plates. The superpower of the century. The party went on as usual. Toasts, laughter, my brother's jokes about my sister's weirdness. I kept quiet. There was no point in getting into an argument. They laughed, I watched. Everything looked the same as always. But I had a feeling inside that something was about to shift. And that's when my phone rang. Lisa was on the screen. She had just stepped out into the hallway. I wondered, why is she calling? I answered, "Where are you?" Her voice trembled. "Mom, come out of the house. Now." I frowned. "What's wrong?" The answer was quick, panicked. "Just get out. Now. Please." I tried to elaborate, but she shouted, "Get out before it's too late." I stood up without a word. Everyone at the table kept laughing, no one noticed. I threw on my coat, took my bag. When my mother asked, "Where are you going?" I said, "Just a minute." And I went out. It was chilly outside. Lisa stood at the gate, pale with trembling hands. She grabbed my hand and said, "Don't go back there. Please." I didn't ask any questions. Just walked away with her. There was a strange feeling inside, not fear, but like a switch had been flicked. I realized I wasn't going back to that house. Not even if they called. As we walked away from the house, I could still hear the laughter from behind the closed windows. It sounded rumbling, as if from another world. The familiar scene remained there. Mother, brother, sister, their loud stories. I knew that if I returned, they would continue as if nothing had happened. They would only notice my absence as an excuse for another reproach. Lisa and I stopped at the bus stop. She looked at me, still trembling. I said, "Do you want to explain?" She shook her head. "No, just trust me. It's bad out there." I nodded. There was a hardness in her voice that I hadn't heard before. It was strange, a 12-year-old talking to me like she was defending me. Usually I was protecting her. Now it was the other way around. The phone in my bag vibrated non-stop. The first message from his mother, "Come back. You're acting like a child." Then from my sister, "Don't make a scene. Everyone's watching." Then from my brother, "You're embarrassing the family." I read it and thought, Family is such a convenient word. You can use it to justify anything, even humiliation. I turned off the phone. Lisa asked, "Are you mad?" I said, "No. I'm tired." It was the truth. I didn't feel angry, only a cold clarity. It was as if someone had removed an old spring from me that had held tension for years. Now it was broken, and I wasn't going to fix it anymore. We took a cab home. I looked out the window. Outside the city there were lights, storefronts, the occasional passerby. Everything looked ordinary, but to me it was like a turning point in a movie. That moment when a character leaves a scene and never goes back there again. At home I put the kettle on, and Lisa and I sat in the kitchen in silence. She was silent and so was I. Words were superfluous. Only one thought pounded in my head. This evening had changed everything. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew for sure what would no longer happen. Me at my parents' house. I couldn't sleep that night. Lisa was already asleep, and I was sitting in the living room with a cup of cool tea. The phone was still off. I knew that if I turned it on there would be dozens of messages. Some accusatory, others demanding I come back. No one would ask, "Are you all right?" They never did. I thought back to the last few years. How at every party I was the one who cleaned, washed, cooked. When the guests left, I was the one who stood at the sink until midnight. And my mother would say, "It's good that I have such a daughter. She'll always help." Helping meant doing all the work and not getting a word of thanks. When I tried to tell her I was tired, she'd say, "You always exaggerate." My brother was always allowed to be late. He was always forgiven for being rude. When he made jokes about me in front of guests, my mother laughed the loudest. My sister would laugh too. It's family, it's all in jest. Only I knew it was never a joke. It was a way of showing me my place. And I took my place in silence. Until tonight. I looked at the sleeping Lisa and thought, she mustn't see the same thing. She shouldn't have to get used to a role where you're used and call it love. Her screaming into the phone, "Get out before it's too late," wasn't just about tonight. It was a judgment on the past. And I heard it. There was silence in the kitchen. I finally realized that silence was the best answer to all of this. I'm not going to argue anymore. I'm not going to prove it. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm just going to walk out. And they will continue to yell at each other in their house. And I will sit here with my daughter and drink my tea. After that night, I didn't go back to my parents' house. The phone rang every day. At first I answered, then I stopped. The meaning was the same. Accusations, recriminations, pressure. First my mother. Her voice was cold. "You're acting childish. You're offended over nothing. You always complicate things." I listened in silence, then said, "I'm not offended. I just don't come anymore." She didn't understand. Or pretended not to. A couple days later my sister called. Her words were even more direct. "You made us look like idiots in front of the guests. Everyone asked why you left. You're an embarrassment to the family." I replied, "I didn't embarrass anyone. I just walked out." There was a pause on the phone, then an annoyed sigh. "You always ruin everything." I put the phone down on the table and never picked it up again. My brother connected later. His tone was firm. "You need to apologize. Mom is worried. We have a family and you're being selfish." I grinned. The word family always sounded like a judgment. When you need something from you, you're family. When you don't feel good, you're your problem. I told him, "You're not worried about Mom. You're worried about how you look." He shouted, "What nonsense. You're ungrateful." I calmly clicked off. A week later, I noticed that the conversations had shifted. Now they were trying to use people they knew. My aunt called me. "Mary, what are you doing? You're hurting your mother. She's an old woman." Then a neighbor. "Your family is worried. Maybe you need help?" I knew it wasn't concern. It was pressure. They were building an image. I'm the villain, I'm the destroyer. And they are the poor victims. Instead of answers, I spent time with Lisa. For the first time in a long time, we had our own life. We went to the park in the evenings. She was learning to ride a bike without hands and was proud of it. We laughed. I learned to enjoy the little things. I noticed Lisa looked at me differently. Respectful. Like she saw me setting boundaries for the first time. It was more important to her than any words. But the family wouldn't stop. The messages got more and more aggressive. "You're betraying us. You chose yourself over us. We don't owe you anything. I looked at the screen and thought, that's right, we don't. But for some reason all my life I've acted like I owed everyone. I've always paid. For holidays. For gifts. Trips. Even gas when my brother forgot his wallet. They called it mutual aid. But there was never any reciprocity. A month later, my mother came to my house. No warning. I opened the door, and she was standing there with a bag in her hands. Her voice soft, almost pitiful. Mary, are you trying to break up with us? Let's not ruin everything. I let her in. She walked into the kitchen, looked around, and immediately said, Your place is too modest. You could have a better life if you weren't angry. I put the tea down in silence. She continued, You've made a fool of us. People are talking. We're ashamed. I replied, I'm not the one who should be ashamed. She fell silent. Then she said, You've always been a difficult child. I smiled. I'm 36. The time to write it all off as childhood is over. A few days later I found out that they had started spreading the stories. My aunt told a neighbor that I had snapped, that I had nerves. My sister implied that I was influencing the child. My brother told everyone that I was ruining the family. This was a new phase, not talking to me but talking about me. I didn't argue. Let them talk. But one feeling was growing inside. They were afraid of silence. Afraid I'd stopped making excuses. One night I turned on my phone and saw dozens of missed calls. The last message was from my brother. You think you can live without us? You're wrong. I smiled. It was at that moment that I realized everything was going right. If they were threatening, then their usual script was falling apart. Lisa was sitting next to me doing her homework. She looked up and asked, Aren't you going to Grandma's? I answered, No. She nodded. Okay. And continued writing. No questions, no recriminations. Just calm acceptance. It was the best answer of all. Another week passed. They showed up on the doorstep again. This time together, mother, sister, and brother. They stood as a delegation. Mother was the first to start. Mary, that's enough. You're torturing us. Everybody's suffering. I said, No. I just don't come. You're torturing yourselves. My sister intervened. You're not thinking about Mom. She's getting old. You don't want her to die with the thought of her daughter turning her back, do you? I grinned. You always find convenient words. It's guilt, it's duty, it's death. My brother stepped forward. You're being cruel. I looked at him. Cruel is being forced to live by your rules. They tried sitting in my kitchen, persuading, arguing. My mother talked about blood. My sister about shame. My brother about family honor. I answered briefly. I kept silent more than I spoke. After 20 minutes they couldn't stand it themselves and left. In front of the door my mother threw. You'll be sorry. I closed the door and for the first time I felt that I wasn't afraid of those words. I was no longer the one in a hurry to smooth things over. Let them live with their own theater. The neighbors began to look the other way. One day in the store a woman said, I hear you've got family problems. I feel sorry for your mom. I smiled and replied, Pity is always for those who complain the loudest. She looked embarrassed. I walked on with the bag in my hands and thought how convenient it was for my family to play the role of victims. But I was no longer part of their play. Meanwhile, Lisa was becoming my anchor. She understood everything without words. Sometimes I'd catch her eye and see the support there. In the evenings we would sit together, she doing homework, me working on my laptop. We didn't talk much, but the atmosphere was different. For the first time I felt like home was a home and not a battlefield. The family didn't give up. Letters in the mailbox, calls from distant relatives. You owe me an explanation messages. They tried any way they could to get me back into my old role. But the more they tried, the clearer I realized. There was no going back. I didn't have to. I just walked out. 2 months after that day, things started to escalate. My brother texted, We're all getting together. Come over. We'll talk. I didn't reply. The next day my sister called. If you don't come, we'll decide without you. I said, Decide. The silence in the phone lasted a few seconds. Then, You've changed. I said, No. I just stopped pretending. I noticed. Their sentences were getting shorter and their emotions sharper. First it was accusations, then requests, now threats. It was a familiar scenario, like trading on the market. First flattery, then pressure, then blackmail. All for one thing, to make me comfortable again. I sat in the kitchen at night, staring at my phone and thinking, it's amazing how loud they scream when they lose control. My parents' house was always noisy, yelling, rebuking, laughing at my expense. Now the noise has migrated to calls and texts. But I had an off button. I turned it off and there was silence. The most honest of all reactions. The last call that month was from my mother. The voice strained, almost weeping. Mary, we're all suffering. You have to think. I replied, I am thinking. Every day. And that's why I'm not around. She sobbed. You're heartless. I said, no. I just finally have a heart for myself. And hung up. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. The third month after that day was the most telling. The phone kept ringing. Letters kept appearing in my inbox, but it all became like an echo. I didn't react. Every rebuke they made lost its force because there was no response. One evening my brother called again. His voice was irritated but not so sure anymore. You can't do this. We're still a family. I replied, stay. Just without me. He started to say something about duty, about responsibilities, but I was already silent. His words sounded empty in the silence. A couple of days later, the three of them came. Mother, brother, sister. They sat down at my table. Mother's first words were, we've come to apologize. I looked at them and thought, they don't even know why. My sister added, we've all overreacted. But this is family. Let's just forget the whole thing. The brother nodded. We need to be together. I stood up, pulling a box out of the closet. There were old photos, letters, documents that I had kept for years. I set the box on the table. These are yours. Take it. My mother turned pale. Are you trying to cut us off? I said. I don't want to. I'm just not involved anymore. Sister hissed. You'll regret it. You're nothing without us. I looked at her silently. There was no response. I closed the box, slid it toward them and stepped back to the door. They hesitated. Then my mother got up and led the others away. They left in silence. The door closed behind them so that the apartment was quieter than ever. After that, another tactic began. Now they wrote as if nothing had happened. Come over for dinner. We need to talk about holiday gifts. You should help with the renovations. I never responded. Every silence was a step forward for me. They pretended things were the same as before, but it was impossible. Their whole system had been based on me agreeing. Now I didn't. A couple weeks later, my mother left a bag of food at the door. On it was a note. We love you. I picked up the bag, set it on the table, and threw the note away. The words had no weight. Love is not measured by soup in a can. Love doesn't require excuses. Lisa had seen it all. She learned silence from me. Sometimes she'd ask, why do they do that? I'd say, because they don't know any other way. There was nothing more to explain. She understood without words. The final scene happened one evening. Mother called again. Her voice was tired. Mary, we all ask you to forgive us. We need you. I said, you need me when you want to use. When I stop, you call it betrayal. The silence on the tube lasted a long time. Then she said, you've changed. I replied, no. I just stopped being convenient. And disconnected. From then on, I didn't wait for the calls anymore. They still came, but I didn't open them, I didn't read them. My life had narrowed down to silence. But in that silence I felt free for the first time. A few days later I heard them start complaining to people they knew. My aunt called me and said, you can't imagine how your mother is suffering. She cries at night. How can you do that? I replied, I can't be responsible for her tears. I can be responsible for my own tears. For other people's tears, no. My aunt was silent, then she said, you're cruel. I hung up. My sister wrote a long message. Half a page of excuses, half a page of accusations. We do everything for Mom, don't we? You always make things so hard. You're turning the baby against us. We're willing to forgive you if you come to your senses. I read it and thought, forgive is an amazing word. Forgive me for not saying anything. Forgive me for not going back to the place where I am humiliated. I deleted the message and never opened it again. My brother acted tougher. You think you're strong? You can't do anything without us. You depend on your family, you just haven't realized it yet. We're not going to let you live your life in peace. I read and laughed. For the first time in years, I laughed at his words. I realized. A man who is afraid of losing power always speaks in threats. They didn't know any other language. My mother came for the last time after 3 months. She stood on the doorstep, looking at me with a long look. She was holding an old photograph of me, my brother, my sister, my father, all together at the table. She held out the photo and said, "Look at this. This is our family. Do you want to cross all that out?" I looked at it and replied, "It's past." She lowered her eyes, put the photo on the shelf and walked out. I didn't pick up the picture. The photo remained dusty in the corner as a symbol of what was over. After that, I finally stopped expecting anything from them. I knew they would try to come back, they would beg, they would accuse. But it didn't matter to me anymore. I closed the door. Not with anger. Not with resentment. Just with a decision. Some evenings I would sit by the window and think about how easy it had turned out to be to leave. Much easier than I expected. All my life I've been afraid. Afraid that without them I'd lose my footing. And it turned out to be the opposite. Without them I finally got back on my feet. No scenes, no explanations. Just silence. Lisa changed with me. She became calmer. Before, every visit from her grandmother and uncle used to make her anxious. She'd hide in her room, pretend she was busy. Now she didn't have to hide anymore. She saw that I didn't give in, and that gave her confidence. One day she said, "Mom, I'm not scared anymore." I nodded. That was the most honest outcome of the whole struggle. I thought, everything I'm doing now I'm doing for her, so that she would never get used to a role where she was only valued for her convenience. I began to notice a change in myself as well. I used to live my life waiting for the phone to ring. The phone would ring, I'd grab it. I was afraid I'd miss something important. Now the phone could lay silent for hours. And I didn't feel guilty. I would open the mailbox, see the letters, put them on the table, and then throw them away without reading them. It was liberation in its simplest form. No arguing. No explaining. Just throw it away. The neighbors would still sometimes ask, "Did you have a fight with your family?" I'd answer, "I just stopped being their support staff." They marveled at my candor. But I wasn't going to choose my words anymore. My life had become direct and honest. The last serious conversation I had was short. My brother called and said, "We've decided to get together without you. We don't need you." I replied, "Okay." He fell silent, then dropped it. "You've changed beyond recognition." I said, "Finally," and hung up. Those 2 words were the bottom line. They wanted me to be afraid to be alone. I wasn't afraid anymore. In the evening I sat with a cup of tea by the window. Lisa was doing her homework. I looked at her and realized this is family. Not those who demand and blame, but those who are around. The silence in the house was the loudest victory. I closed my eyes and for the first time in years I felt I was free. Occasionally I heard voicemails left on the tube. My mother would talk about grandchildren, my sister about family traditions, my brother about duty. I didn't answer. I left their words in the void. There was more power in that silence than any of my explanations. I did not prove. I didn't make excuses. I just walked out.